Mr. Millay, and this is your video review for your quiz tomorrow in U.S. history over the Cold War and civil rights. You need to know what the satellite states were, those states that surrounded Russia and were part of the USSR. You need to know that what the Cold War was and why it was called the Cold War. You need to know what partitioning was. That's where you separate different countries into a North or a South, or an East and a West, like we did with North Korea and South Korea, or North Vietnam and South Vietnam, or East and West Germany. You need to know what NATO stood for. You need to know what the Marshall Plan was. You need to know what it means to be blacklisted. You need to know who Joe McCarthy was. He was the senator that helped lead the House Un-American Activities Committee. You need to know what that was. You need to know that Truman was a president during the Korean War, and that during the Korean War he had to fire his General MacArthur for insubordination. You need to know what Jackie Robinson is famous for. You need to know what happened to Emmett Till. You need to know that Earl Warren was the Supreme Court Chief Justice. You need to know who Rosa Parks was, what she did. You need to know why they created the interstate highway system, when that was to evacuate in case of a nuclear war. You need to know who came up with the idea for the interstate highway system. That's Eisenhower. You need to know who Earl Phabus was. You need to know what Order 9981 he did. It was an executive order that integrated the armed forces. That meant there was no more segregation in the Army and the Navy. You need to know who Martin Luther King was and what he did. He was a very important leader of the civil rights movement. You need to know who Gandhi was. That's the guy who gave a lot of his his ideas to Martin Luther King. You need to know what a sit-in was. You know who killed Martin Luther King Jr. You need to know who Malcolm X was. You need to know what happened at the Bay of Pigs, why that was such a fiasco. You know, John F. Kennedy himself called it a fiasco. You need to know who Fidel Castro was. You know who Che Guevara was. John F. Kennedy was the president during the Bay of Pigs invasion to try to get Fidel Castro out of office. You need to know what it means to embargo something or someone. You need to know what no man's land is. And, you know, we'll talk about the Berlin Wall and why it was created and how it was created. Make sure you know what that was and what no man's land was. You know who Lee Harvey Oswald was. You know who LBJ or Lyndon Baines Johnson was. Mikhail Gorbachev as the last president of the USSR. He was the last president of the USSR. And Boris Yeltsin is the first president of Russia. You need to know the year that the Berlin Wall fell. That's 1989. You need to know that the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan cost money and gained them nothing. It was just a waste of time and effort. You know what Ronald Reagan did during the Cold War. You need to know how Eisenhower, even though he wasn't the president, ended the Korean War, because he basically said, "Hey, if the war is still going on when I'm become president, it's not going to be good." You need to know why Korean War is called the Forgotten War. You need to know what McCarthyism was. You need to know that the interstate highway system basically killed the railroad industry. You need to know what the court case Brown versus the Board of Education did. You know who the Fifth Amendment communists were. Those were the guys who refused to incriminate themselves when asked by Congress that they're communists, and they got in trouble. They were blacklisted. You need to know what civil rights are. That's the rights that a citizen has. You need to know who Jack Ruby was. He killed the guy that killed Kennedy. You need to know who the first man in space was. That's Yuri Gagarin. You need to know about the Cuban Missile Crisis. You need to know what caused it and how it was solved. You know JFK told Germany he was a donut. You need to know what the space race was. You need to know who the first black Major League Baseball player was. You need to know what happened in 1991. That's the fall of the Soviet Union. You need to know what ICBM stands for. That's Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. They could send a missile across the world. You know what Sputnik was, who the first man on the moon was, who were the Hollywood 10. You don't have to know their names, but you have to know what happened to them. They were arrested for refusing to answer questions of Congress. You need to know what the U-2 incident was, And you need to know what President Reagan's satellite defense program was called. It's also the name of one of my favorite movies. You know, little hint there. You need to know Malcolm X was a member of the Nation of Islam. You need to know why MacArthur was fired during the war. You need to know who was the head of the FBI during the days of McCarthyism. You need to know about the Montgomery bus boycotts, how they started and who started them. And you need to know who sent in the National Guard, who was the president when the National Guard was sent in to protect black students. And if you study all of those things, you will do fine on the quiz tomorrow.